Hello RPG fans, welcome to the realm of unlimited imagination. If you're like me, you love to think about what kind of character you'd play next in your favorite role-playing game. So today we're going to talk about druids, and specifically about the wild shape feature for druids. Maybe you've looked at a druid or heard that they're a very powerful class, but you're a little bit intimidated by the wall of text or how the wild shapes work with the animal forms and all of that. So we're going to go through that today, and I'm also going to talk about specifically why I think the Moon Druid is a super strong subclass in the 2024 rules. So first we'll discuss wild shape, and we'll go through the rules and try to get clarity on what they all are and what they do. We'll talk about the 4 forms that I would choose first and how I would optimize it. Again, it's not the only way to play, but there's a logic to why I would choose those forms, and I'll share that with you. We'll clarify a little bit what happens with your stats as a druid when you change into a wild shape. And then last of all, we'll kind of make the connection for why 2024 druid is better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. So this is the start of our wild shape optimization. Please remember, as we get started, hit that like button. It really does help the channel. I'd appreciate it if you could do that. Comment if you have a different understanding of the rules or you don't think what I'm saying is the most optimal way to play. I'm always happy to hear other people's opinions. Leave the comments down below and we'll start the conversation. So like, subscribe, leave comments. I would appreciate it. All right, let's go through wild shape. The power of nature allows you to assume the form of an animal. You can do this as a bonus action. Shift into a beast form that you've learned for this feature and see known forms below. You stay in that form for a number of hours equal to half your druid level. You get this feature at level 2, so when you first get it, it'll be 1 hour, and it goes up from there. You keep that shape until you use wild shape again, until you have incapacitated condition or die. You can also just leave the form early as a bonus action on a later turn. You can use the feature twice per day, and you do gain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and all of them on a long rest. So if you use an animal form in every combat, as long as you get a short rest in between, you'll get that wild shape back. And there are other features that allow you to pretty much ensure that you'll have wild shape whenever you need it, if it's a tactic that you want to use on your druid. Known forms. You know 4 beast forms for this feature, chosen from among beast stat blocks that have a maximum challenge rating of 1/4 and must lack a flying speed. You don't get fly speeds till level 8. When you finish a long rest, you can replace one of your known forms with a different eligible form. So if you, for example, wanted to have a specific form for a specific adventure, you can change them out 1 per long rest. When you reach certain druid levels, your number of forms and maximum challenge rating goes up, and starting at level 8, you can get a fly speed. When choosing forms, you look at the monster manual. If you find a beast form that you want to use somewhere other than the monster manual, just check with your dungeon master to make sure it's allowed. Wild shapes. Here's the chart. So at level 2, we get 4 forms at a 1/4 CR. At level 4, it goes up to 6 forms at a 1/2 CR. And at level 8, we can do 1 CR with 8 known forms. While shape shifted, you retain your personality, memories, and ability to speak. So now it's clarified that when you wild shape into any wild shape, you retain your ability to speak. It's pretty good. When you assume wild shape, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your druid level. Used to be a lot more temporary hit points that you get. Now it's just your druid level, so a lot fewer temporary hit points. Game statistics. This is not a whole lot of words, but it's pretty complicated. Your game statistics are replaced by the beast stat blocks, but you retain your creature type, hit points, hit dice, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, class features, languages, and feats. You also retain proficiencies that you have in any skills or saving throws, in addition to gaining the proficiencies of the creature. If a skill or saving throw modifier in the beast stat block is better than yours, use the one in the stat block. So if all the stuff is staying the same, then why does it say your game statistics are replaced by the beast stat block except for all this stuff, right? Well, your physical attributes are that of the beast. So it gets a little bit complex. Your mental skills, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are all exactly as they're printed on your character sheet. And the physical stats you have to figure out what they are based on the beast and your own proficiencies. Your proficiencies apply, but not your base stats for those physical skills. You can't cast spells while shapeshifted, but it doesn't break your concentration or otherwise interfere with spells that you've already cast. So if you cast a spell that requires concentration, like Moonbeam, for example, you can wild shape and maintain concentration. Nice. Your ability to handle objects is determined by the form's limbs rather than your own. In addition, you choose whether your equipment falls in the space, merges into your new form, or is worn by it. Worn equipment functions normally, but the DM has to decide if it's practical for the new form to wear a piece of equipment based on the creature's size and shape. Your equipment doesn't change size or shape, so the equipment has to fit the new form, merge with the new form, or it falls to the ground. Equipment that merges has no effect while you're in the form. So easiest example is armor. If you have armor on as a human, then it's pretty hard to say that armor is going to fit any wild shape that you choose. If you make armor that would fit a horse, it would be pretty hard to use that armor as a human. So in that way, some equipment is just never going to work. But things like rings, amulets, we'll talk about that more later. But those kinds of things you could reasonably wear in a wild shape. So the temporary hit points have gone down quite a bit. The beast forms themselves didn't really get much power creep. Most of the other classes got better features, improved features, more powerful class features. We got weapon masteries for the melee champions. So it feels like druids, in terms of beast forms, at least with the ones that we've seen that have already been printed with the player's guide and the dungeon master's guide, they're the same, or even in some cases I think a little bit worse than they used to be. So it feels like the beast forms didn't get much love, and you're losing a ton of temporary hit points for the better forms. But I do think there's overall better clarity on what does and doesn't work in beast forms, so I think it's better. I do wish they could have kept the template thing. I think it would have been easier for a lot of players just to use templates, but in the end, we that's not what we got. So if we look at the beast forms themselves and we decide that the beast forms aren't really better, Moon Druid is all about being in wild shape and taking advantage of that. So if the forms aren't really that much better, then why do we think wild shape and Moon Druid is the way to go? Well, it's good for different reasons. So it's not that you want to do damage as a Moon Druid, but if you're wild shaping, there's features with the Moon Druid that now make it really good to be a Moon Druid when you're doing wild shapes. So if we're not looking for damage, what is it that we want from a wild shape? Well, here's my list. First of all, I want some kind of wild shape that's going to do scouting. Tiny size lets me get in places where I don't belong. Stealth lets me stay hidden. I can spy on conversations. I can get into places where I don't belong and then resume my normal species form and, steal things or get information or whatever I need to do. So scouting is a big deal. I want a scouting form. I want to pay attention to movement types. So some creatures just have good movement speed, for example, but some of them can swim, climb, or after level 8, fly. So we want to pay attention to movement types. We can get other senses. Some beast forms have blind sight, tremor sense, things like that. We want to try to pick up extra senses so that if we need them, we can just wild shape, pick those up, and take advantage of them. In combat, conditions are sometimes more important than damage. So making a character prone, grappled, restrained, putting the poison condition on them, those things can sometimes be a huge advantage. And some of these beast forms allow you to do that. Prone, grapple, restrained, or at least poison damage with some. So those are considerations for your animal forms. And the last is, for me, sometimes you just want your druid to carry a lot of stuff. If there's somebody in the party that went down and you got to take them back to town for a resurrection, you want to be able to be a beast of burden. Let the party just put the mostly dead party member on you. And at low level, you can only do it an hour at a time. But if you can move a couple hours, take a short rest, move a couple hours again, you can really help your party out by being able to be a beast of burden and carry things out of the dungeon. So in my opinion, damage really isn't the draw for Wild Shape. There's a lot of other things that we're looking for. So with that, let's go right into it. Let's talk about what Wild Shapes I would pick. You get 4 at level 2. So I'll show you the 4 that I would pick and explain why I would pick them. So here we have a Weasel at CR 0, so we can pick it. It has a climb speed of 30 in addition to a speed of 30. Acrobatics +5, perception +5, stealth +5 as skills that it has proficiency in. Has dark vision out to 60 feet. And that's going to allow us to get most places we want to get with a good perception, a good stealth, acrobatics to jump around, to get through windows, to hold on to ledges, whatever we need to do. So I think a Weasel is a nice little scout. All right, obviously not for damage, but the Weasel's going to get us where we want to go. And remember that you're keeping your mental stats, so if you have to make an insight roll with your character, you still are using your insight. If it's trained, you're a druid, you have high wisdom, you're probably making pretty good insight checks to figure out what people are talking about. As we see the Weasel here, I'll also just kind of say one of the things that you can do just for role-playing purpose with your druid, you could have a druid that sort of has like a characteristic trait. Maybe your druid has these glowing runes that they take a wild shape and the runes glow, and then when they turn into the animal, you see the animal with the runes glowing, and then the runes fade. You don't want to have glowing runes when you're running around as a Weasel. But there's this nice little opportunity to have a role-playing moment where, people see you change form, and then obviously it's your custom animal form. I like that. You can use that if you want. I do, because I think it's fun. All right, the next form that I like to look at is Giant Crab. This thing really has a ton of stuff packed into one form. Speed of 30 feet, also has a swim speed of 30 feet. We're good for underwater. If you look at the traits, it's amphibious, it can breathe air and water. So not only do we get a swim speed, but we can also breathe underwater. So if for some reason the adventure takes us underwater, crab form, no problem. We can move around underwater and breathe water and be fine. It also has blind sight out to 30 feet. If you're in darkness, if you get a magical darkness spell, can't see anything, as a giant crab, blind sight 30 feet, you can see everything out to 30 feet, regardless of darkness. Obscurement, fog spell, for example, provides heavy obscurement. Nobody can see anything. Blind sight solves that. Ever-smoking bottle, things like that. This crab, no problem. Anything within 30 feet, you know exactly where it's at. Blind sight can be pretty fantastic. So this creature picks up all of those things. Blind sight, swim speed, water breathing. Also has an auto grapple on its attack. So Claw is a melee attack roll at +3. It does bludgeoning damage, D6 +1, nothing to write home about. But if the target is medium or smaller, it has the grappled condition. In the new rules, when you try to do a grapple, normally the creature makes a saving throw to see if it's grappled. This doesn't include a saving throw to initiate the grapple. If you hit a medium or smaller creature, it just is grappled. Okay? The escape DC is pretty low, but if it's trying to escape from you on its next turn, it's wasting its turn getting away from you. Okay? So this is really strong, right? Even though we're not that strong of a creature with that strong of a grapple save, the fact that all we have to do is hit with the attack and we establish the grapple condition is a big deal. That lets us grapple things, and we're going to do fun stuff with that later on. I'll show you in the build. I like the Boar as another combat form, and the Boar at low level is CR 1/4. You can grab that right away. If you charge 20 feet straight toward the target before you hit, the target takes an extra D6 of piercing damage, which brings your damage to 2d6 +1. It's not bad. But then if it's a larger, smaller creature, it just has the prone condition. Again, there's no save, there's no check, there's none of that. Just if you charge 20 feet and you hit, that creature is prone. Sometimes that's exactly what you want in combat, is to knock something down, so the Boar will do that for you. Or has a chance to do that for you if you hit anyway. For a carrier, just a beast of burden. Draft Horse is pretty good, and I think most people would just look to the Draft Horse. But I actually like the Mule better. It has 40 foot of movement speed. The trait Beast of Burden says it counts as a large creature for the purpose of determining its carrying capacity. So it gets a lot of carrying capacity at medium size. If you're in a dungeon and the hallway is 5 foot wide and you're trying to play a 10 foot wide Warhorse, again, because the Draft Horse is large size, it can be inconvenient trying to move through a dungeon, going over little bridges and stuff like that. Oftentimes they're represented on maps as being 5 foot wide. So a large creature can kind of struggle while you're indoors or underground in certain areas. If it's not a problem for your group, then the Draft Horse, I think, is better. But the medium size of the Mule gives you more versatility indoors and underground. So something to consider. With those 4 creatures, let's look back to the original things that we were looking for. We got our scouting form. The Weasel has a tiny size, stealth, perception, all wrapped into one, plus a climb speed. We're good for scouting. Movement types. With these 4 forms, we've picked up a swim speed, a climb speed. The Boar has 40 foot movement speed if we really just need that extra little bit of movement speed in the battlefield. With the Crab, we picked up the blind sight of 30 feet for our extra senses. For conditions, we've got forms that will allow us to do prone and grappled. And then for carrying capacity, we've got the Mule. So all 5 of those things that I was looking for out of my wild shapes, I managed to fit within four forms. So Weasel, Giant Crab, Boar, and Mule is a good place to start. And again, you can play whatever you want for your beast forms. Those are the ones that I like. So let's talk about the stats now. This can be a little bit confusing. Your game statistics are replaced by the beast's stat block. All right, you've turned into the beast. Your statistics are replaced by the beast's. Well, except for your creature type, hit points, hit dice, intelligence, wisdom, charisma scores, class features, languages, and feats. So you're the beast, except for all of these things, which stay the same. So I think this can be confusing to a lot of people, but just realize that with regards to your mental stats, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, you keep those. You also retain skills and saving throw proficiencies and use your proficiency bonus for them, in addition to gaining the proficiencies of the creatures. So if you're making an insight check, deception or diplomacy check for charisma, any of that stuff, it's all just going to be straight off your sheet. The confusing part is when you get to the physical stats, strength, dexterity, or constitution. When you make skill checks or saves off of those, you still have the same skill or proficiency that you would have had before, but you're using the stat from the creature. Okay? So that gets a little confusing. I think the easiest way to look at that is to look at a concentration save. Okay? So you get hit, you're concentrating on a spell, you have to make a constitution save to maintain your concentration. Let's look at our beast statistics. If we were a Weasel, our constitution score would have dropped to 8. Let's go back up to the Weasel stat block just to kind of show that. So here you go. Here's a Weasel, constitution 8, save -1. Now, if we're proficient in the save, we would carry over that proficiency bonus, but our base constitution score is 8. So we start out at -1. And this is where I've seen people misplay it quite a bit. They just use the character sheet and they do their concentration save based on their character sheet. But the way this is written, you retain your hit points and hit dice, you retain your mental stats, but your physical stats change. You keep your proficiencies, but you don't keep your scores. So the con goes to 8, and then the save is -1. So a straight Druid at low level wouldn't have proficiency in Constitution saves. We could take Resilient Constitution feat at some point to get that, but this is where things can go wrong pretty quickly. If you're trying to concentrate on a spell, you go into your animal form. with certain animal forms, it's really easy to lose your concentration. Even the giant crab only has a constitution score of 11, so that's a +0. So it's not easy to concentrate in animal form. One of the things you can do is talk to your GM about getting an Amulet of Health, and maybe this is something that they won't give you until level 7 or 8 or something like that. That's fine. It's just something to think about. If you had an Amulet of Health, it sets your constitution score to 19. So as a character in your normal species form, whatever that is, you would have a constitution of 19, and that would give you a base save of +4. If you could reasonably wear that amulet in your beast form, you could maintain that, keep that +4, and maintain your concentration in animal forms. Humans are adaptable. Humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, whatever you want to say. Anybody with opposable thumbs has a pretty good time making anything fit. So let's say you wanted to be a crab, and you said, I'm going to craft this Amulet of Health specifically to fit my crab. I'm going to wear it around one of my claws. This is what it's going to look like. It's about the same size as when I wear it around my neck. It should be pretty reasonable for you to have that amulet worn. And just to go back and check, objects. Your ability to handle an object is determined by the form's limbs. We're not going to handle it. We're just going to wear it. Okay? Worn equipment functions as normal, but the DM decides whether it's practical for the new form to wear the equipment based on the creature's shape and size. Your equipment doesn't change shape and size, right? But it's just an amulet with a chain. So if we can convince the GM that we're making our amulet specifically to fit a creature, one of our forms, then we should be able to have it in that form. Now, it doesn't do anything for you other than the saving throw. The 19 Constitution doesn't increase your temporary hit points that you get from the form. It doesn't change your hit points as a character, because remember, whenever we did the wild shape in the first place, we maintained our own hit points and hit dice. So none of this changes. It doesn't change anything. The only thing the amulet gets us is an increased Constitution saving throw. But that could be pretty important. So it's something that you'll want to consider. At level 4, you pick up 2 more shapes, and you can go to CR 1/2. I like the crocodile. Feel free to pick other shapes that you like. Constrictor snake is a nice option also. The reason I like these characters is because they not only grapple a creature like the crab, but they also apply restrained condition. So with a bite from the crocodile, we get piercing damage, and if the target's medium or smaller, it has grappled condition, and while grappled, the target also is restrained. Characters that are restrained have a really hard time getting out and moving, and it's pretty strong in the game, right? So the crocodile, I like. It also puts an end to some certain nonsense in the game, like flyby attacks. Let's say there's a particular type of creature that's flying in. It has flyby. It doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. It swoops in, hits you, and flies where you can't hit it. Pretty annoying. With a crocodile, you ready in action. It's not an attack of opportunity. It's a ready to action. When the creature gets close, you attack. If you hit them, they're grappled and restrained. They're done. They're not moving anywhere for the rest of the turn. If they haven't taken an action yet, maybe they could try to use their action to break that grapple, but their movement at that point would still have been reduced to 0, and they're going nowhere. So it's a way to stop flybys. It's a way to stop burrowing. If a creature burrows up from underground, attacks, and burrows back underground, you can get those. If there's a creature that's invisible, that's coming in and attacking and running away, you can do the same thing with the crab. The crab has blind sight, right? So it doesn't matter if the creature's invisible or not. If it's within 30 feet of you, you will know where it is. You have blind sight. So you can ready in action with the crab. The invisible creature comes in. You grab it, you grapple it, you're holding it. So I like that. And your form isn't doing that much damage, but we don't care about the damage. We want the game effects, the control effects that we can do with it. And then, of course, for any druid, level 8 means fly speed. Owl, I think, is the easiest logical choice. 60-foot fly speed, that's massive. You could easily have Long Strider on yourself when you convert yourself to an owl form, that long strider. Not a concentration spell, it's still up and running, so you would have 70 feet of movement. If you had a haste effect on you from some other spell or potion or whatever, you could have 140 feet of movement. It gets pretty ridiculous how far this owl can go. But yeah, it's super fast, and it has the flyby trait, so it doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it flies out of an enemy's reach. So even large creatures or something that would normally be able to attack you as you fly by, you don't provoke attacks of opportunity. So it's really good with Conjure Woodland Beings. That's a spell where you do damage if you're within 10 feet of enemy. And, you know, you approach a large enemy within 10 feet, you do damage, and then you move away, and it gets an attack of opportunity. But with an owl, you just fly by, you do your damage, and go away. It's really, really powerful. So I think the owl is kind of the go-to fly speed. So, you know, once you get more of these forms and more options, you can do what you like. Bat could also be a new scouting form that you pick up here. Also has a fly speed, tiny, stealthy, blind sight. So it could be an interesting little scout. So Conjure Woodland Beings at its base level, enemies within 10 feet take 5d8 damage when the aura enters their square or when they enter or end their turn in the aura. Treantmonk actually had a nice change to the wording. The problem with Conjure Woodland Beings right now, you could cast Conjure Woodland Beings, turn into an owl. It's a tiny size. You fly around damaging everything. Let's say you have haste on and you fly 140 feet. You go through 3 rooms. You're ready in action. As soon as your turn is over, you're going to move again. As soon as your turn's over, you take that ready to action. You fly another 140 feet back to your original location, damaging everything on the way. The fighter takes his turn next. He grapples. You're a tiny creature. It doesn't cost him any movement. He runs around the battlefield, swinging around an owl, and exposes everybody to the Conjure Woodland Beings again. And then he passes you off to the monk. The monk does the same thing, passes you off to the wizard. Wizard does the same thing. And you just crush everything on the battlefield with 6 instances of Conjure Woodland Beings. It's a pretty broken way to play. So what Treantmonk suggested was enemies take 5d8 damage when the aura enters their square on your turn, or when they enter or end on their own turn. And that makes everything simple, right? You can do damage to them once when it's your turn, and you can do damage once when it's their turn. It still gets you 2 instances of damage, but it doesn't expose you to this whole 4, 5, 6 instances of damage. So I'll give Treantmonk the credit for that. Go watch his video on it. He's much more elegant at explaining it than I am. But I think it's a fair solution to Conjure Woodland Beings with the owl form. So this is where we have to talk about how easy it is to knock an owl out of concentration. So if you're just a straight druid and you haven't done anything for your concentration and you don't have the proficiency, you have an armor class of 11 and a constitution save of -1. So creatures will hit you. An AC 11 is, it's almost auto hit for creatures at 8th level or higher. A lot of those creatures have +9, +10 to hit. They roll a 2, they're hitting you, So you're going to get hit. You don't provoke attacks of opportunity, but all of those creatures can ready in action. And then as you fly by, you get hit, and you have to make a concentration check, and you'll almost certainly fail. It's a moment of sadness when you've upcasted Conjure Woodland Beings to your highest spell level, and then the first time you get hit, you lose concentration and lose the spell, lose your highest spell level for the day without getting much done. So this concentration thing is really an issue if you haven't paid attention to it, but this is where I think Moon Druid is really going to solve the problem for us, right? So I'm not going to go into every detail of Moon Druid, but let's just suffice to say they can do higher CR level beasts, level 3, level divided by 3. So when they get this at level 3, when they get their subclass, they can also already do CR1 beasts, which includes the brown bear, which is fantastic. You get 3 times your druid level, so you get a lot more temporary hit points. And then your armor class in the beast form is 13 plus your wisdom unless the form already has higher. Now, these beast forms, they don't have high armor class in most cases. So, unless they make a turtle or something that has really high armor class, this is almost always going to be better. Assuming that you maxed out your wisdom, even at low levels, you're going to have AC 13 plus 3, which is 16 armor class. And then as you take that up to 20, you'll have 18 armor class eventually in your wild shapes. And the difference between 11 armor class as an owl, or let's say 17, which you should have at level 8, you should have a plus 4 to your wisdom, 18 wisdom by then, right? So getting a 17 armor class is so much different than that 11 armor class. Man, it's huge. So it's good. More temporary hit points, all that stuff. Let's talk about the brown bear form while we're here. This is a CR1 creature, and traditionally it's been something that people like. It does have a climb speed. It's got a speed of 40 feet. But the big thing is this claw attack. This thing is insane, right? Melee attack roll plus 5, slashing damage, and if the target is huge or smaller, it has prone. Again, no saves, no checks, no rolls. It just is prone. So you run in, you knock it prone with your claw, you get a bite attack, you have multi-attack already at level 3, several levels before most classes get access to multi-attack. So, Moon Druids in the bear form are living the good life for level 3, 4, and 5. And then after that, it really starts to fade off, and we don't really get better beast forms. So there's this pretty steep power curve where we've got really nice power for a couple levels, and then it kind of fades away. But we do have the two attacks, and we do have this prone. Huge or smaller creatures just are prone. Even if the damage isn't that great at higher levels, being able to knock huge things prone is still a reason to take bear form. Also, Warhorse is really good. When you can get access to CR1 half monsters, whatever you're using for your beast of burden, I would suggest you update to this Warhorse. 60-foot movement speed. The hooves have 2d4 plus 4 damage, which is okay. But then if you move 20 feet straight toward the target, you get an extra 2d4 damage. And that brings you to 4d4 plus 4, which is it's pretty good damage. Considering that you're probably doing this so you can carry a party member into combat and make some pretty interesting joint attack rolls and things like that. It's pretty good damage, and as a Moon Druid, you can get access to this already at level 3. It's good damage for level 3. Large size, lack of hands can be inconvenient in a dungeon, but there's certain times where being a Warhorse could be really good. 540-pound carrying capacity, that's massive. That's easily 2 people. Move speed is 60. Zoom around the battlefield and do decent damage. It also has that auto-prone thing on huge or smaller, so the horse is good. So now let's talk about Moon Druid. What is it about Moon Druid that's really going to put us over the top? So I'll read Looter Radiance, that's not it. Each of your attacks in wild shape form can deal its normal damage or radiant damage. You make this choice each time you hit with those attacks. The limitation is if a creature is immune to non-magical damage, your beast forms would just be sunk. Now it basically says, okay, if anything's immune to physical damage or non-magical damage, you simply make it radiant damage and the problem is solved. It's a nice ribbon feature. I don't think it's that good. But here's the thing. With Moon Druid, level 6, increased toughness, you add your wisdom modifier to your con saves, period. While you are wild shape, you have better ability to concentrate than when you're in your native form. So if you're normally an orc, you wild shape into a beast, you're going to add your wisdom modifier to your con. I can't tell you guys. In a game of statistics that's meant for the statistics to be flat within a certain range, and your rolls, put you over or under based on skills and stats, right? Something that just gives you another +4, +5 to that ability is really, really overpowered. So Moon Druid's going to be able to keep concentration. They can already cast spells in their native forms, right? So while they're in wild shape, the spell list that you get for being a moon druid, which includes Moonbeam, you can cast those spells while you're in animal form and maintain concentration easily. All right. If you combine the moon druid feature with the amulet trick, now that owl that normally has that -1 con save now has +4 from the amulet, +4 from that feature, and we're looking at a +8 to our constitution saving throws, including concentration checks. So we're almost automatically succeeding. If we can get proficiency in the constitution saving throws, then we're automatically succeeding on very high concentration checks. So this is fantastic. So we already saw where our armor was going to be much better, the temporary hit points are much better, and now our concentration is going to be managed easily in wild shape. All right, so here's a couple combos. We can already cast Moonbeam while we're wild shape, so let's use that as a combo. And let's cast Moonbeam one turn and do damage to a couple targets. They move out, fine. That's what we expect. Next turn, we go into our beast form, crab form or crocodile form. We grab them, we hold them in place, we drag them, we stuff them into the Moonbeam, and they take damage again. And they're held in the Moonbeam. If they want to break the grapple, they're going to have to spend their turn getting out of the grapple to get out of the Moonbeam. If they just decide to attack you and not break the grapple, then they're stuck in the Moonbeam and they're going to take damage from it. It's a nice little thing you can do starting at level 3 when you have access to second level spells. You can already start using this Moonbeam trick. And also they're grappled, right? So it's kind of a damage and control thing. It's for the level you can do it at, level 3 or 4, it's super strong. Crab can do 2 at a time, right? Because remember, it says it has 2 claws, and it specifically calls out the idea that if you want to grab onto 2 things, the crab has 2 claws, each of which can grapple 1 target. So it's telling you should do that. Fantastic. All right. So let's bring this all together then. And we'll talk about Conjure Woodland Beings as well here. So at level 8, if we were in that bear form, we also get Primal Strikes by now, so that adds a d8 to all of our beast form damage. So the bear strikes would be doing, the claw would be doing a d8, d4, and +3. The bite would be doing 2d8 +3. And if you hit with both of those, it would be 22 damage and knocking them prone. Again, the hits aren't that high. I think it's +5 for the bear. But if you hit, you'd do 22 average damage and that big effect of knocking things prone. With the Moonbeam, again, this is a 2-turn setup thing, but you put up the Moonbeam and then you take enemies and you put them in the Moonbeam. If you're a crocodile, for example, you would bite for 2d8 +2, and that would give you 11 damage. And then 2d10 damage if you put them in the Moonbeam. That's another 11 damage. So you're at 22 damage for this trick as well. If your target is grappled and restrained and they don't get away, they take another 11 damage on their turn. So 22 for a bear, 33 for dunking them in a Moonbeam. And then we look at Conjure Woodland Beings, 5d8 damage per target, save for half. If we could contact 3 targets on our turn and keep them in the aura on their turn, that would be 135 damage, save for half. So 22, 33, 135. Not even on the same playing field, right? If we really want prone, the bear makes sense, but not for the damage, makes sense for the prone. If we want grapple and restrain and control, we can use the Moonbeam to make that do extra damage, but mainly we're trying to control the targets. If we just want to do damage, it's going to be Conjure Woodland Beings, go into a form that can move around the battlefield, touch as many targets as we can, and do sickening amounts of damage. For example, if you could actually do 2 contacts with 8 targets, that would be 360 damage. So you can see, this just scales off the hook. When you upcast the spell, it does another d8 damage for every level that you upcast it. So even with a couple levels of upcast, the damage scales really well. You can also do spike growth At the tables that I played at, they put an end to the nonsense where you grapple something and drag it around the edge. We've decided that that's just not in the spirit of the game. So it's kind of like, we're not going to do that. So if you can push it, pull it straight forward or back, you can do damage through spike growth, that's fine. But dragging it for 500 feet around the edge doesn't work at our tables anymore. But if that does work, then again, it's something you could consider taking an animal like a crab and dragging them through spike growth. I think Conjure Woodland Beings is just better. And once you get to level 8 especially, casting Conjure Woodland Beings, going into owl form, running around as an owl, it seems like the way you're going to play your druid after 8th level, no matter what your subclass is. And if that's the way you're going to play, if that's the most damaging thing you can do, then Moon Druid is the subclass to keep that concentration. Better AC, better concentration saves, better constitution saves overall. I think it's the way to go. The 2024 Monster Manual is going to come out soon, and I'm hoping maybe we could get a few big beasts. And when I say big, I mean big. I want the size. I don't really care about the features or the damage. I don't want to, some crazy 5-attack a turn beast or anything like that. I don't care about the damage. But I would love to see that giant crab at large or huge size. That would be phenomenal. I would love that. If there was a dinosaur that we could use, Tyrannosaurus has always been out of reach, right? That's CR8, I think. And we can only get up to CR6 as a Moon Druid, I think. Level 18, right? Divided by 3 is 6. So maybe there's a CR6 dinosaur that we could get to, 5 or 6, CR5 or 6. That would be fun. You can get to an elephant, but that's not that impressive, right? We want one of these creatures that can grapple or restrain, and we just want it to affect large creatures or maybe even huge creatures at the highest levels. Maybe there's a snake. Maybe you could just have a gargantuan snake. That would be fantastic. I don't know. I'm dreaming. But if they do come out with some really large-sized beasts, I think that would make Moon Druid just even all that much more powerful. So in summary, when we're talking about Wild Shape, I think Wild Shape is a great feature, but for all the other stuff in the game that you can do with it, scouting, movement types, breathing underwater, holding your breath, grapple, restrained, poison, all that stuff, look at your animal forms for that stuff. When we're talking about Moon Druid as a subclass, better AC, better concentration saves, and if we're going to play our character with cast a concentration spell, go into beast form, Moon Druid is really the premium way to do that and maintain your concentration. So I think that's the way a lot of people are going to play, and that's why I like it. Okay, and then just right here at the end, I'll also say, with all of this stuff in mind, you do keep your proficiency for Constitution saving throws, and the easiest way to get that is to take your first level, level 1, as a fighter. You set your Druid up with all the stats and features like you are going to be for a Druid. It's easy to meet that 13 dexterity that you need for a fighter. You're probably going to give 14 dexterity to your Druid anyway. So you can start at your first level of fighter. You get Constitution proficiency for your saving throw, which is fantastic. You get Second Wind, which you can use in Wild Shape. It's not a spell. You can regain hit points that way. You get weapon proficiencies that you probably won't use that much, but I think the first level of fighter is the way to go. Again, trying to get into your beast forms as soon as possible for high damage, I don't think really is the way that it works anymore. So 1 level of fighter, 19 levels of druid, that establishes a lot of power right there at the start. I think Warcaster is still probably the best first feat for most druids. It gives you +1, rounds your wisdom up from 17 to 18, assuming that you've got it maxed. And the advantage on concentration checks still works because you keep your feats while you're in Wild Shape. So I think that's the premium feat at 4th level. And then check with your GM to see if they'll allow the Amulet of Health trick. So if you do all of these things, you'll gain the proficiency bonus from fighter. The Amulet will give you a base +4 to your concentration constitution saves. And you could potentially even get the Moon Druid feature on top of that. At higher levels, you'd be looking at like a +13 Constitution saving throw in Wild Shape. It's really good. I think it's the way to go. All right, that's going to sum it up. That's going to wrap up our discussion today on wild shape optimization. Please remember to hit that like button on the way out if you didn't hit it on the way in. Subscribe to the channel to see more of this kind of stuff in the future. And as always, like I said at the start, any comments that you have, good, bad, otherwise, differences in the rules that you see, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave that in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next adventure.